James Gillet, welcome to the Growth Concept podcast. Thank you so much for coming on this episode. I'm so thankful for this opportunity with you.
Thanks, Ian.
With viewing all your content so far, I think we can both say that your life has panned out in a not so conventional way with what you've been through and stuff. So James, let's get straight into it. Do you mind sharing a bit about your background and what is it you do, as well as what do you feel your true mission in life is right now?
Okay, that's a really good question. All right, well, I'll go from the start. So, I essentially grew up in Armidale, so in Perth. It's probably it's well known as being one of the roughest suburbs in Perth. Got into a lot of trouble when I was younger. It all started off as fun, but then got into the drugs, got into the crime, and eventually it just kept on escalating. When I was 18, I went to prison for 3 armed robberies, 1 attempted armed robbery. So I spent 3.5 years in prison at that point in time. I was very impressionable, so and I had a lot of, I got denied parole on that sentence as well. So I had a lot of anger.
What does that mean, denied?
So when my parole came up, I was actually denied, even though I did all the courses for it.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I had, I was holding on to a lot of resentment and anger, and that basically... when I got out, I just got straight into, I was just pretty much, lack of a better expression, running amok. So I got right into the whole criminal lifestyle again. And that came to a head, I think 11 months later, I went back to prison again for selling supply and grievous bodily harm. So I broke someone's jaw I was at my granny flat, actually, at my family home. And that was the last time I was in prison. That led to another 2 years in prison. And basically from there I went, I guess where it turns around was actually halfway through that sentence.
Yep.
I realised, because once you've put yourself into a hole, the world treats you completely different, and that's part of the problem of trying to pull yourself out of that hole, is that all your environment, even the people that they sort of see you as just being stuck in this certain way. And it took me a while, but I actually got a bit of hope, because my best mate, who'd been to prison for armed robberies as well, separate ones, he actually got a career start in rail. So wow. He started in the rail industry, and I remember calling him one day, and he's telling me about the job, and it's one of the highest paying labouring industries in the world. And I was like, oh, and he was like, it almost because when I was in prison, I thought I was destined for that life. I just thought once you've been in there's no opportunities for you to get out.
Right. And
I couldn't see myself. The reason, even when I got out after my first prison sentence, I tried to work for a week, and I was unloading containers, and I think I got $500. It was just really real menial work. And in my head, all I could think of was, this is going to be the future for the rest of my life. And then I ended up catching up with some guys from prison, and I started selling some drugs, and within a short period, within an hour, I'd made over $2,000, and I'm like, well, this is what I want to do at that point in time. Because it's very flashy, that lifestyle, trying to make the fast money and all that sort of stuff that comes with it. But and which obviously then led to me just getting fully hooked on drugs and completely destroying myself, doing a lot of harm in the community. I used to do debt collecting. I was debt collecting for some pretty heavy people, and doing a lot of drug selling and taking and using, and just being a complete menace. Really.
Going down a super dark path.
Oh, yeah. Real dark, yeah.
You were saying that you had somewhat a turning point when you were... was this in prison?
Yes, this is on my second prison sentence.
How old were you then?
25.
What do you think triggered that turning point? Because I imagine with what you grew up with, that is what all you know.
Well, I was very fortunate. My dad he's a school principal, so I did have a loving, but I pushed away from them when I was a teenager. So I sort of went down my path, and it was almost like I was rebelling against my dad, who was trying to, be a good role model. And he's always, all the values I have today, I've gotten from him. So I didn't have the excuses that I guess that other people would have done that went down that path, because there's some people that they'll grow up and their whole family's like that, and it's just well, you only know what you see, So I was very fortunate, and if it wasn't for all that, coming from a decent family, I can promise you now I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be in a prison cell somewhere or dead, So,
that's bloody crazy, man.
Oh man, that's just the harshness of life, in those darker roads, and a lot of guys who you know, who've lived down that life and have come out the other side of it and stuff. Like there's not many, you know, like it's very, you know,
I
like,
get shivers.
yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Like once you've put yourself into a hole in that suffering, like some people just never escape, and there's a lot of people that just never will, you know?
I think what's truly inspiring with your story, I wouldn't, it's beyond inspiring. It's a lesson, a hard lesson that you can now teach other people that were in your shoes. Like I'm sure you're aware, you're most qualified to teach the people in your old self. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of the healing process. Cause like people think like, you know, trauma's not just what happens to you, but it also like, so I think the main impact of trauma that you get, especially from when you've, you know, had my own personal stuff and, you know, like, but a lot of it actually is the person it turns you into, you know, like if you become if you get into that real like dark stuff, like usually a lot of dark stuff's happen to people that do that sort of stuff. And then it becomes, you know, like, to get into like, you know, to try and explain it in a way that, like to try and contextualize it, like Carl Jung in the archetypes, he talks about the shadow concept. That's usually then what you start to really feed, you know, the dark part of our nature. And all people have it, you know, like, you know, people might not realize it, but there's always a side of us that is one that we wouldn't want other people to see. You know? And I think when it comes to people that have gone up with a lot of trauma or have gone through real difficult circumstances or have done a lot of that sort of stuff, it just starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, especially when you're young and you've got not much, you know, like no emotional intelligence control, then you become quite dangerous. Yeah.
So then moving into what do you actually do now?
Okay, well, I'm sure. Do you want me to talk about even the turnaround point, and then I can get to where this is?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah.
Well, so in my second sentence, when I heard about my best mate who was, you know, he got into rail, you know, as soon as I saw that he had turned his life around, it gave me hope. And, you know, like there's a process when you're in despair, it's like the first thing is hope. Then like you start to put the practice in and the faith that it's going to come together, and then you start to believe in the process. So it's a step-by-step process, but he gave us that hope. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to get into rail. And, you know, I had an opportunity to get in through him. And so what I did was I went down to the library and I started reading books on self-development. And that was because I wanted to do something, and I got no value from the courses that were actually in prison. You know, and I can't speak for now because I haven't been in prison for over 7 years. But at the time it was very, you know, like I just had no value from them. So I started reading books, and the first book I picked up was Lucy McDonald's How to Be an Optimist.
Lucy McDonald's How to Be an Optimist.
That was the first book I started with, and it blew my mind away. Like it literally just blew everything on your way, because as soon as I started to understand that everyone's view, like nearly 95% of the people in prison, their view is very pessimistic, and you learn the difference between being a pessimist and an optimist. It just like, I just thought I'd be like walking around the prison going, like he's, you know, like it just started, like everything just started clicking. And another thing happened on the second time as well, is that I viewed the place differently when I came back in on the second sentence. The first time I was very young, so I was 18, around your age. I was looking up to all the guys, the flashy lifestyles, all like the gangster guys, the guys who were like, they had the most influence in the prison, and I was aiming towards that. The thing about that is that when you're aiming towards that, eventually you will get what you're aiming for, and you don't realise what you're actually aiming for. So, for example, in the criminal world, right, if you start climbing that hierarchy, one, you get massive amounts of prison sentences, or you get, like you've seen a few years ago with Nick Martin, the boss of the Rebels, got shot dead at the Motorplex, you know, like, like, so you're aiming for something that could potentially land you 20, 25 years in prison, or a bullet in you. And it's not, you know, like a lot of people like to glorify it all, but man, I've got mates who are very close to the top of it, and you know, they believe that like they're always under police escort, their houses are getting kicked in, you know, and that's just because of the choice, because of who they are, you know, and that's the and you know, so it's like there's a lot of payoff, even though people think, oh, everyone, like the glory, the fear, you know, the respect, the fear, everyone's,
you see it on the media all the time as well, which
yeah.
doesn't help the case either.
No, but it sells papers, you know what I mean? And like, you got to remember that the media is business. So whatever the business is, and people have a part of their brain that is, they're seven times more likely to pay attention to things that create fear, than things that are positive. So that's why it's very hard. So if you've got the most positive story in the world, that's not going to, if you know, for example, when that person stabs 6 people at a shopping centre in Sydney, that's going to make the front page. Positive story is going to go right at the back of it because people will pay attention and they'll pick up a paper and they'll go, yep, I'm buying this.
Why do you think that is? You said that it sells very well, that negative stuff. But if the government or whoever is trying to change the social norms or the culture, why doesn't it just be like, okay, focus on the positive stuff? Why do you personally reckon?
Because we're in a democracy. So you're saying people are 7 times more, so the more fear that gets generated within the community, people are more likely to go vote for someone if they see them as being the solution to the fear.
Gotcha.
So the fear's got to be there for there to be a solution to it, you know? So when you look at it, like around the world, for example, with the drug, we got double, I think, the national usage of something of methamphetamine, one of the highest using meth, WA.
Shit.
And it's one of the highest, that's what they call it, the meth capital of the world in a sense, in some places, you know, because of the fact that it's so high. Now, the reality of it is like, well, more money gets spent on the punishment side of it. And that essentially means that when people, you know, like, so because people are passing judgment on it, so there's all this, you know, like, we'll go hard on it, we'll go for a war on drugs, we'll do all this sort of stuff, not realising that the people that they're targeting and trying to go hard on are actually members of the community as well. So that's why there's places around the world where they're shutting prisons down because they've gone more of a therapy, you know, like over in Europe. In Portugal, I think they spent all the money they used all the money they used to use on fighting drugs to actually like putting programs and stuff in place to actually pull people out of that life. And I think they halved their drug usage rate in the whole country. You know?
And we don't have that process in Western Australia. No, and that's you know, like, and that's a huge issue. It's like people, everyone's, you know, like. It still blows my mind that it's not like that they spend so much money. I mean, for example, they privatise some of our prisons. So, for example, Serco, for example, like their business model is on numbers in beds. Now, they're the people that are entrusted to fix the rehabilitation. Now, that doesn't make much sense to me because if you understand business, if their business model is people to stay in beds, then why would you be like, you know, like that doesn't make sense on the whole outsourcing. You're just profiting on the bad.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So corrupt, eh?
So like, it's not in their model for everyone not to come back to prison. You know? Like it's not in their interest. Yeah.
So with where you are now and looking back, what has been a significant turning point or experience that made you realize that your circle of influence is a lot more crucial than you think?
Okay, so with the circle of influence, well, for me, like because I knew it, like I was growing up in Armidale, like and even for all for after all, mine was really the prison community, like the jail crowd, the guys like in crime, organised crime and stuff. For me, it was actually when I went back, like, well, once I started doing all that development stuff in prison, I realised I needed to get out of it, and it was the most difficult thing I ever did because my ego was like I'd always had money in my pocket. I always had all that sort of stuff. And even when I did nearly a year of self-development in prison, when I got out, there was a window period and I had no money. I had nothing. And I knew how to make money very easy. I could make fast money. And I remembered like for 6 weeks that I was out, like I had no job and I was waiting to try and get a job and I was hanging on to this faith. But throughout my whole life, I had all this evidence of things just not going my way. And it's like basically trying to override that inner fear of, you know, like I even had a Marlow Ute, I couldn't even put fuel in it, you know, like that's how much, you know, and I was very fortunate I was able to get like money off my dad just to be able to pay the rent and stuff at the place that I was staying at. Right. And it was, you know, a lot of people don't have those sort of luxuries. And after about 6 weeks, I remembered I nearly broke. And it was, this is the thing about life, there's always, sometimes you have these crucial moments in your life. And one of them was the night before, actually, like, so after 6 weeks, I get this phone call and some guys, they wanted me to come and do some stuff with them. And I'd said no to catching up with people a fair few times, but I was at the closest moment to breaking, to going, you know, like I might just go like stuff it, like this isn't working out. And I stuck to my guns. And then the following day I got a phone call to say that I'd gotten a job up on rail and look at BHP, you know. So had I gone out that previous night, I would have just been gone back into that cycle again. So it's so crucial when people get out to actually have things in place and support. And the hardest thing about it is that while I was in prison, like I dreamed of this lifestyle in my head, but the reality of it is that when I've come from that place, you've got all this, your whole way of thinking is set like it is in prison. It's everything is all that way inclined. And then I felt like a fraud when I went into the workforce. Like it was like what I'd always wanted was that like you have a FIFO job, not have to worry about looking over my shoulder. But then I had a lot of like guilt, fear, like, and I was worried about the judgment of what my past might be like, you know, if people found out, because there's a lot of tall poppy syndrome. So like if you try and, you know, climb the ladder, especially when it gets into mining, you know, like there's a lot of, not saying like all places, you know, it's a universal thing, but there's places where they'll put a knife in your back, like, you know, not literally, but they'll put a knife in your back, like, you know, as soon as they find out some information or some dirt about you.
Yeah.
And that was very, so like there was always that unease around my past, which, you know, and then I had to make new social circles. So that was one of the things as well. But luckily for me, I went into rail, and rail is pretty good. Like it's a pretty, like, you know, the guys in rail are pretty, it's like you work hard, people don't care where you've been from. If you got a good work ethic, you know, then people will respect you. So I was very fortunate that I fell into that industry.
Even the trade in general, like I've seen the work environments, like that field gets so much respect.
Yeah, exactly. Working environments and stuff, you know, and I didn't, like, I had to learn how to do banter. Because in prison, right, if you said something, for example, if you're in maximum security, you know, like if you said something that could be perceived as disrespectful, like you want to make sure that, because this is like, you're now indicating that violence is about to happen. Like, you know, if you said something disrespectful to someone, that person is like, you've got to do something about it. If someone disrespects you, you've got to do something about it, because that's how you stay safe in a survival type environment. Whereas when you try and transition into the workforce, someone might just, like, now it's funny, the things that I laugh at now were like, you know what I mean? Like my mind would be like, is this guy trying to, you know, have a, you know, like, and that was how my mindset was set. So,
I imagine that would put quite a few people back in the prison setting with, if that's all you know, that's all you know. And when you're that transition of where you were in prison, then transitioning into the workforce, I imagine that'd be so hard. I want to touch on what kept you on track to stay focused. Even you were saying that one night when you got asked out, and you're like borderline broke.
I was broke basically from when I got out. I was on like Centrelink, which would go straight away, and I was always used to living more of a flashier type lifestyle.
It's like, sell the bag and get like loads of money, or keep pushing through until that light comes out. What made you push through that?
I internally, I knew that I was never going to go back to prison.
Yep.
So there was something like inside of me, I realized, and especially once I started to develop, like the more I read, the more I'd expand my mind, the more that conviction was set in me. And the reason being is that I looked at it logically. It's like, you know, if you live to about 80 something years old, you 31,000 days on like, time is the most valuable asset that you have. And I thought about it, and I really thought, well, like, you know, I've spent nearly 6 years in prison, and I'm only 20. Like, by the time I got out, I was 26. I looked at it as in the sense that not only that, but I thought to myself, like, I want to have a family, I want to find a partner, I want to have that sort of lifestyle. And I watched it all the time. Like, you see guys that have kids, and they're going to the visits, and they're only getting to see their kids for an hour a week. And they've got no control or no real proper influence in what's happening in their family life. And, you know, and like, I thought to myself, like, there's no way in hell, like, if I want to have a family, if I want to have a good life, I can't be continuing on doing with what I'm doing. And that's the whole thing about it. It's like, you know, like, I had to have that, I had to come to that realization myself, because I'm the type of person that I can't be told. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like, I think, like, it's like, if someone tried to tell me that, and I wasn't ready to hear that message, it would have been irrelevant, because plenty of people did. But when I came to that conclusion myself, then I was in a position where I could actually start making that growth spiral upwards, you know?
So where you are now, with young individuals these days that may be struggling, whether it's in a lower economic environment or more middle class or even upper end, if they're surrounded by the wrong people, then typically they'll go down the wrong path with their mates. What guidance or advice would you give to young individuals that may be struggling with finding the right people to spend their time with?
All right. So if you're in a family and it's not like the best environment at home, like, you try and find something that interests you. Sports is one of the best ways to do it, you know, like, and if you've grown up tough and a lot of in tough areas, like things like even martial arts, like boxing and stuff, because you'll learn things. I love boxing, and I think boxing's great because I think if you get, let's just say you go to a boxing gym, like you get all the endorphins, you'll get that good, like you'll get good positive males around you. If you get ready for a fight, you're not going to, when you, like, boxing's not like cricket. Like with cricket, you could drink a carton and then go play cricket the following day. In boxing, you have to be so disciplined because you're getting into a fight. So, you know, like guys who box, especially in the amateurs and stuff, it's not like what people see on TV with the pros. Amateurs, there's a lot of respect in that space. But then you're not drinking, you're not out partying, you're not doing drugs, you know what I mean? Like you're not smoking.
Yeah, you have to be switched on.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, if you're not, like you're going to get found out. It's not, you know what I mean? Like, and the worst thing is, it's like, you know, in life you can fail, but if you fail because you didn't give it your all, then that's where you get that's the only thing that you should ever be like regretting or feeling ashamed about. If you know that you didn't give it your all at something. Whereas if you give it your all and then you lose, well then it's like, well, that person was just better than you on that day. You know what I mean? But like you can go home, look in the mirror, and be content with the fact that you're that person, like you gave it everything you got. And that's a completely different version. To me, that's, even though it's a loss, that'll be still a win. You know what I mean? Because you can be proud of yourself, and that's the only real opinion that really matters. And this is the thing with young people. It's like, when it's part of being a teenager, right? Especially, and as you go into being even in your early 20s and stuff like that, people are so insecure. Like everyone is. So everyone puts on a front. They put on this like act, but you know, and they need all their mates to feel like they're tough, or they need this and that, you know. And it's that insecurity, and it's like they feel when people are younger, their social circles are a lot more bigger than when and then as you get older, it's just the few select people that you have in your social circle. The reason being is because of that insecurity. And the other side of it as well, even this is for you listeners that even do have good parents, is it's part of the human, it's almost like that human biology thing where you've gone, like you're in the transition point from being a child, very dependent on your parents, to being an adult, you know. So what it is it's not like that young people don't listen, and I hear this a lot from people's parents go, oh, the kids just don't listen. It's like they just don't listen to their parents, you know what I mean? But they're looking for influences elsewhere. And that's where people have to be really careful. It's like if you go to the streets, you're going to find influences that do not want to, you know, like, it looks flashy, like it might look like, you know, and it's, you know, it's fun to, like, you know, push the limits and get outside the boundary, and it's why there's a phrase called the rebellious teen phrase. But you don't understand, like, the decisions that you make, you can't go back from. Like if you take, you know, for example, I was addicted to methamphetamine. It's like if you take meth, that can, you know, like just once, and then that you're, you know, like that can completely destroy you. Like that'll send you down a pathway that you never would have expected that you're going to go down. You never would want to come down, and not many people even break free from, you know. And this is the thing, and it's like people will do that just to fit in, because that's, you know, or just to not feel that insecurity that teenagers feel, but it's a natural part of it. And that's how people, you know. But the beauty about that whole insecurity thing is that to build confidence, if you want to build confidence, the process behind building confidence is building up evidence that you're is by pushing those limits. So it's by looking into your fears and then trying to face them. And they're really good. I love Stoicism. It's one of my favorite philosophies. But there's a guy called Seneca, who's a great like Stoic philosopher. He says to do the reverse diagnosis. So think of what the fear is, and then think of the worst case scenario. Be at ease with that, and then just go for it. You know. And I can, recently I've even applied this, you know, because of as I'm, you know, shifting into the man that I'm becoming. I had, you know, like at the start of this year, like I had an intrigue around, like, you know, conscious dance. Like I'm in sobriety at the moment. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, I would like that, but I've never danced. I can't dance. And like, I'm tough, you know, I'm tough. I mean, like, you know, this was the old persona. It was like, I'm this tough guy and all the rest of it. But then I realised, like, no, well, I'll try it, because once I started to understand the value of facing your fears, then it became something that I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a go. So I remember even driving to go to my first, like, this conscious dance, which is sober dancing. You know what I mean? Like, I've never even danced before, and it's like, you know, it's something that I would like laughed at someone if they were telling me they were doing that. You know, that's, you know. So as I was driving there, like, my mind was giving all these excuses not to go do it. And I was like, oh, no, you know, this isn't you. What are you trying to do? Like, like this train of thought was going on in my head.
Right.
And the thing about it is that when you, once I recognized that it was fear that I was feeling, it's like, okay, I'm feeling fear. then it's like, well, I refuse to let fear dictate the decisions that I do. Like, and I'm like, no, I'm going to go do it now. So it actually gave me, that's because you can't have courage without fear. So courage isn't trying to, like, I used to think courage was when I'd do something crazy or whatever it may be. Like especially when I was in the criminal things where I'd, do something real violent or something or like what would be considered out there with a group of people, and
you'd get that rush.
I'd get that rush from it. But that's what I thought courage was. But that's courage if you're living in a fear-based type world. Like that's a different, but when it's love-based courage, it's like, sometimes it takes courage to do the thing that's good, right for you, that's best for you, and this is what keeps a lot of people frozen, where people go, oh, well, how do you get people get stuck in toxic relationships? It's because the fear of usually when someone's in a toxic relationship, their self-worth gets dragged down. So they don't actually, like, they're not loving themselves. They don't feel like they're worthy of it. But then, to leave that relationship would be for them to be showing love, and to break out of fear into love, it needs courage, like, because that's showing love towards yourself,
So essentially to develop that stronger circle of influence as such, definitely look into fitness,
boxing.
For young.
And if you want, like, for example, if you're young and you want to become successful and you're coming from a tough area, look at ways that mentors, like, to be honest, like, that's the best way to describe it. Even when I went into rail, it's like, you're always looking for mentors. I have mentors now. I've got I've got a sponsor in recovery. He's like my spiritual mentor in a sense. I've got business mentors, because I need to, like, I know they've got all that wealth of experience. It's like, well, I need to, like, I can draw from that. And like, when you're looking for a mentor, it's like, it's not trying to imitate your mentor. It's like, think about, you've got to have a real, like, you've got to be, like, always be a student of life, because even all your wisdom will come from your failures. You can't get wisdom from reading books. It comes from all the mistakes. Don't be afraid to don't be afraid to take risk. You know what I mean? Because if you fail, it's just a learning curve, For a lot of people, especially if they've come from rougher areas, they fail and they look at it as a reflection of their inner worth. That's not the case. It may seem like that and it may feel like that.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, because when people are suffering, everything is about them. So, and I can relate to this, so when I was at my suffering points, I didn't have, like, it's almost like you could be a great host, the type of guy that everyone, come over, make everyone a feed, like, you're just an awesome host. But if you're on fire, are you going to worry about making people a feed? You're going to put yourself out. That's what suffering is. That's the easiest way to try and explain it, So you're going to be concerned about yourself. And that's, when I was in my suffering, all I cared about was my wants, my needs, and I didn't have the capacity to do it for people outside of myself. Now, and so that also means that when I tried to do something outside of what I already knew, or what I was already, which was, that's that criminal cycle. And that's part, because the reason I went back in as well was because of the fact that sometimes when you're in hell, it's better if all your company's in hell, it's like, it's better to try and, like, in your mind, it seems safer to just stick with what you know rather than try and break free into the unknown, because the fear of the unknown is it's a real fear, and it's a strong fear. But the only way to tackle that fear is to push into it, And when it comes to expanding your circle, like, with myself now, like, I've, as I said previously, like, I've done things that were outside of my comfort zone. I've done Toastmasters because I wanted to learn how to speak publicly. I've done, like, even, to be honest, even when I went to North Metro TAFE and I became a lecturer. Now, I'd come from industry, so I was really I built myself up in a spot where I was a welder. I'd been welding for about 4 or 5 years. Really, really good at my craft. And then to become a lecturer, which was going from blue collar to white collar, I had to go through the same process as I did from when I went from prison into rail, But the thing is, like, I had the hindsight to know that discomfort doesn't last forever. It's just a period. It's almost like, and the reason that discomfort's there, it's like your brain's trying to, like, learn everything. So you're going to be really crap. When I first came into TAFE, I could barely turn on a computer. And then, like, in the last 2 years that I've been there, I've developed, with the help of the compliance team, which has showed, like, I've learned so much while I've been there. But I've developed 2 nationally accredited qualifications. There's like hundreds and hundreds of pages, like the learning guides, the resources, everything from scratch. And that was, but like for a few months at the start, I was horrible at what I was doing because I didn't know, and I didn't like, because it's like you've got to learn your whole environment, which takes a little bit. And then you've got to like, how do I make this more efficient? How do I get quicker? How do I get better at this? And then like, because of my industry expertise, I was the only person at one point I was the only person at TAFE that knew anything about rails. So then I'd be, you know, like I had, this is another real valuable lesson. It's like people like to surround themselves with people who are exactly like them. And I'm very creative and open in my thinking process. So it's natural that I'll get along with creative, open thinking people. But when it comes to things like when I was at TAFE, I got the most value. There's, you know, I call her one like my TAFE mum, you know, she's like always, you know, but she is very orderly. So she's very down to the point, cross the T's, dot the I's. That's why she does the compliance stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's what she does. Yeah. So I remember I'd go there and then I'd have these like long-winded debates about even a paragraph that could go for an hour and it would just be driving me nuts. But then eventually it made me better at developing content because then I'm looking at everything like, you know, so then I'd think, well, how would she, you know, the lady speaking about it, how would she view this? What would she say? And then like it got to the point where then I'd be giving her stuff, oh, this is good. And I'd be like, really? Like, cause I'd really, you know, like she doesn't care. She'd just tell me straight out if she thought it was shit. You know what I mean? Like, so I really had to earn this is good. And then that in a sense made me better at developing content.
Like that different perspective.
The complete, yeah. And just recently I was at Curtin Business School and same thing. We had mentors in our small group and there was a guy there and he, like, as soon as I picked that he was the person that was least like me, he was the person that I would go to try and get advice because I needed to refine it because, you know, like those people, like you need the people who are very like orderly, very, you know, the creative people are really good at, I'm really good at, I can do things, I can make things happen. But I need someone that can counter that. You know what I mean? For example, like especially going into business, it's like I need someone who's going to be the person who's just worrying and stressing out about all these little minor tiny details while I focus while I focus on the bigger stuff. You know, so it's like, you know, a lot of people fail in business because they'll go and employ someone who's just like them. It's like, we've already got you. You don't need two of you. You need someone who's the opposite of you to make the business stronger.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Even that yin-yang situation.
Yeah.
So with obviously growing up in Armidale and being surrounded by the wrong group of people as such, they've all taught you lessons, I imagine.
Well, you know, like even with the wrong group, like they were all just like how I was. So everyone's like that. And, you know, you got to think, so if you grow up, let's just say you grew up in Cottesloe, it's a very like, you know, the community's very safe. There's an energy about it. It's very loving. It's a beautiful area. You know, like that's just the energy of the people. So in Armidale, it's all fear. So fear, like there's a lot of, if you go walking around Armidale at 11 o'clock at night, you're going to feel like you're in a rough neighborhood. You know what I mean? And the thing is, everyone grows up around that. But what's respected in fear is the ability to generate fear. That's where the hierarchy is.
Yep.
So the toughest guys in Armidale, the toughest guys in Balga, the toughest guys in all those sort of like rougher areas, what people are aiming for, they're the top of the chain in those areas. Where those same people wouldn't be the top of the chain if they were in another area. So it's an environment type thing, you know?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way before.
Yeah. And so I was just climbing what I was seen as that circle. So even though, you know, like, so essentially even the people that would be bad influences on me, but I would have been bad influences on others, you know? So it's just a vicious cycle. So it's not that's probably the best way I can sort of articulate
How did your relationships go with this transition, obviously, with getting a job, being, as we discussed, like opening a circle, your network to new different types of people? How did your relationships go with adapting to that? Did some suffer or did some improve?
Are we family, romantic?
Like in general, like it could be family, friends.
So with friends, like this is the thing about friends, right? You'll know if someone's really a friend if you're, like, for example, I had friends who were like, I thought were my best mates, but they're just really just drinking buddies or drug using buddies or whatever it may be. Or, you know, like it was just someone that we just enjoyed doing stuff that wasn't, you know, positive with. But once you start to break away, you get to see who your real friends are. So if you're the type of person, like, you know, a prime example, like, you know, I've got a friend, like, people will laugh and like they'll make, because the way that people ease tension is they'll make jokes and stuff about it. And you know, one of my closest mates, he was having a lot of issues with alcohol and he was getting into trouble and stuff up at, you know, camps and doing lots of dumb shit. But then, like, you know, everyone's laughing, like, because it's just entertaining for people when you're doing like a lot of dumb shit and people aren't really close to you. But your real friends are the people that will pull you aside and say, look, man, you're fucking up. Like, you need to, you know, and having those conversations. And, you know, because when you're doing like especially if you're going down like a real dark path and this happens, this is a generalized thing, especially with alcoholism and stuff, is that people just start to like destroys families. Like they'll be like, oh, sick of my partner, like, and then they just want to go out drinking with their mates because it's the only time they don't have to have responsibilities. And it becomes like a savage cycle, and then their relationships end up failing and things like that. And it's widespread in Australia. Like a lot of kids that are going through school now don't have both their parents together, and there's a reason behind why that shift has happened. There's many reasons, but that's one of them. You know what I mean? It's because of the fact that there's not enough people actually going, hey, look, man, like, wanting the best for other people. It's almost like, and when the reason that people like to see other people getting worse is like, if you're doing dumb shit, people that like who are at that, like, like for example, if you've got addiction or people that have like, alcoholism, or if it's drug addiction, rather than look at themselves, they'll look for someone who's doing worse than them, and that gives them comfort about where they're sitting. So they, and this is the other thing as well, is as you try and grow and transform in life, and as you try and level up, people that were where you once were will be like, they don't like that. But a lot of people don't like that, because then that makes them have to look at themselves, because they see you as equal. As soon as you start stepping away, then it makes them have to have a harder look at what their position in life is. And that's just the reality of it, and that's why it's always important to be able to, because if you're not in a really good place to be able to actually have the strength to break free from that, it'll suck you back down again. And then that's another failure. And then you go, oh, failing and failing. You know what I mean? Like,
a very important thing to consider with mates, like making sure like they stay focused and all that with whatever they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can have fun and enjoy stuff and that, but it's just like you need to know when it becomes unmanageable. You know what I mean? Like to say, like, like when you're young, like I would, I'm in complete sobriety, but I don't think that people should all be in complete sobriety. You know what I mean? Like if you have an issue with it, and that's an internal thing. Like, for example, if you're, I know your audience is younger. It's like if you're at university, or if you've just started an apprenticeship, but then like you start rocking up late because you've been drinking too much, and then like you miss Mondays. Like you might think, oh, you got away with it on that day, but what you're doing is you're scoring on the scoreboard against you. You know what I mean? Like, and eventually, then something will happen, or you'll get overlooked when there's things for like promotions or stuff like that. Like you're not going to get put into a position of responsibility. And if you want to be successful in life, you have to learn how to take on responsibility. There's no other way around it. You can't be successful and not taking on responsibility. People look at it like, if you want to be a millionaire. People go, oh, like how great would that be? But they go, no, well, you're actually like, you probably have to run a business. You're probably going to have to be looking like your decisions impact not just you, but you've now got people that are under you that like their families are relying on you being like, switched on and making the right decisions and making the right moves. So that's a lot more pressure than someone who might just be working, complaining that the boss is just this and that, not realizing that when that, because they're viewing it from a rose-colored glasses, seeing it as something it's not actually is. Even like you look at, for example, we've got like our billionaires that we have in our state, like there was decisions made, and like people, like 700 people lost jobs even at FMG just recently because of, policies and things like that. But, so usually when things like that all come about, that's, like the figurehead is the person who cops the blame for it, if it doesn't work out. And that's why it's, and that's one thing that took me a long time to realize. And when I was drinking and partying, even after I got out of prison, before I went into recovery, and I was working, and they call it in recovery the golden handcuffs, where you've got the money and means to go out and party all the time. But then like I have moments where I'll be like, well, I'd look at my tax returns and stuff, saying I've earned like over 180 grand a year or whatever. But then I'm like, well, what have I got to show for it, and things like that. So it's one of those sort of things that you have to be able to have an honest look at yourself. And it's not a judgmental put yourself down thing. You just have to be able to look at the areas of your life and go, okay, well, this is what I need to address. The problem with addiction is that when people are caught up in the grips of it, everything else but the addiction itself is the issue, and that's the problem when people are in that suffering
it's that
state.
Different perspective shift.
Yeah.
I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
If you could go back to your younger self, what would you tell yourself and why, and would you do anything different?
That's a really good question. Like I definitely would not recommend anyone follow the path that I went down, because I'm very lucky. I'm very grateful that I've had I've had things fall. I've had a lot of losses, but I've had things fall my way at the right times. And I'm a believer. There's a concept that Nietzsche came up with called actually he didn't come up with it, but he elaborated on it really well, called amor fati, which means lover of fate. So now, as of today, I don't regret going and doing those 6 years in prison, because you need the stuff. Like, it's through the difficult times that you actually build your resilience. You can't buy it at Kmart. You know what I mean?
That's made you who you are now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's given me the strength to be able to tackle on things that I never would have had the strength to be able to do prior to that. But, and it also means I've got a really strong purpose in life, because my purpose is to want to try and transform other people's lives. So it gives my life a lot of meaning to me, you know, so I wouldn't change anything. But on the same note, you know, like, if you'd asked me that same question even several years ago, I would have been like, no, I would have been like, I never would have done this. I would have done that, you know. So when I guess the best thing, this is the thing as well, and a lot of people don't realize it, is a lot of, you'll gain wisdom from your mistakes, but it's so much better to be able to be open to other people's advice and go, okay, actually this guy, you know, being able to learn what it is that you want. And when people, this is on the last thing I want to touch about, especially about the mentorship and advice, look at what that person does compared, like, I wouldn't go to my stepmom or, you know, for business advice, but I might go to her for relationship advice. I'm not going to go for my business. Like, you need to, it's almost like you don't go to a mechanic to go get the plumbing in your house fixed.
Yeah.
So that's how you have to view mentorship. It's like, you know, what areas, they might be really great at business, but, you know, like, is that, like, are they treating their partner right in the relationship sense? Maybe that's not the person, you know, like, you could have a mentor that you could go, this is the person for this, but are they going to, like, and that's why you have to be very skeptical when you have a mentor, is like, well, what are they doing? Like, well, what are the parts about them that I could really learn from? What are the behaviors that I can sort of emulate, and their mindset, things I can pick up on? But then what are the things that maybe I shouldn't do? You know, rail's a prime example. There's so many great rail workers, love to just drink piss all the time. And it's like, they'll teach you how to be the best welder, but it doesn't mean that you probably should go drink 12 beers with them after work. You know what I mean? And like, that's even myself. Like, I was that type of guy that would do that. You know what I mean? And so it's, you know, like, and people do feel like that because they feel that it's a part of, humans are very, like, social animals, so they feel that need to connect. So they'll go, oh, that's what I meant, like, I want to try and impress in that. So learning when to put boundaries and stuff in, and learning how to, you know, if anything, you know, the way I view it as well, and this is another bit of advice I probably want to give, especially for your viewers, even if you're 18 and you've got a mentor, there's a thing called the learning pyramid theory. So you retain 95% of what you teach. So if you have a younger brother, if you've got a mate or whatever, so if you're learning something, if you're learning a new skill, if you're picking up on something and you really love it, teach someone else. Yep. Because through that process, you only retain about 20% of what you hear. I think it's like 40% of what you might write down, but you retain 95% of what you teach. So if you're trying to learn, that's what I say, if you want to master something, learn how to teach it to people, you know, so everything that you learn. So it's always good. So, and this is what I say, people that have got younger brothers and stuff, like, or sisters or whatever it may be, whatever it is you're learning, pass it on to someone else, because by passing on that information, it actually, not only have you heard it, but then now you've got it, like, you're refiring more brain, like, neurological pathways in your brain as you're then teaching it on to others. Also, like,
trying to understand your head and explain it in a way they'll understand.
Exactly. And it almost cements it in there. And then you have to then, you know, like, for example, I've learned so much more about rail being a lecturer than I was when I was in industry, because I just knew how to do things. But then when I'm trying to tell someone who hasn't done it before and I'm trying to teach them, I then have to explain the processes and thoughts and, like, you know, and even maybe just the technique that might suit them better, you know. So it's actually great. I've gained more knowledge in that sense. Yeah, wow. Because before it wasn't conscious what I was thinking about. It was almost subconscious, even, especially when it comes to things like welding or even knocking off clips, putting on clips, you know, guys at different height levels and stuff, they maybe hold the equipment differently, like all those little things that you sort of learn as you're trying to teach other people. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, that's very valuable. Thank you so much, James, for coming on this episode to share your hard-won lessons on your past and how that got you to where you are now. Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man.